I've got a question, and it might be a little off topic, but I'll shoot. Um, I was thinking about Genghis Khan and what was his role? I mean, we have a lot of history about him and his troop of merry invaders, but what was the purpose of that role? If anyone in the circle or Reimann has some insight into that.
Probably not him, but we'll see who else. No, I don't know the answer to that, but let me see who does. God can take that on
Oh,
because I am the conductor of the symphony. And when people play their parts, we play in harmony. And when people don't play their parts, the symphony isn't much of a symphony, is it? They come in at the wrong parts or they all want to play the bassoon. We will soon not have anyone to play the flute, you see. And so the birds will all die because there are no bard calls from high above, you see. And so the nature of Genghis Khan is the nature of the struggle between the dark and the light, you see, because the dark is the place where we park all the reality that will be exposed when we turn on the light, you see. So you don't know what's in the dark, do you? You can't see in the dark. And it's only when you shine the light into the dark that you can see what's in there. And so Genghis Khan is the dark part of the heart that says, you will never catch me. You will never catch me. You will never come to understand me. Because if you did, you would die, you see. If you tried to understand me, you would die because you would lie in state. And people would say, well, he was kind of a bastard today. He killed a lot of people, see, in order to spill all that blood. That caused him to think that he could escape his destiny because his destiny was to be dead, you see. His destiny was to be dead because he did not trust on God. Energy. He trusted on his capacity to kill all his opponents, you see, in order to be the king of the hill. Sort of like saying, I know I'm going to be dead. I know it's all going to be over. But when I go, I want to know that I was so smart and so cool that I could be the ghoul that made all these others depart before me. And I could prove that I was the king of the hill because they would have to bow before me, you see. So the role of Genghis Khan and others like him is to be the painful reminder for humanity that if you trust on the darkness, being dark, you see, in other words, if you trust that you don't know what's going to happen when you die, but you assume that you will just go into the darkness and never live again, that you will lose your capacity to be sane. You will become insane. So Genghis Khan was insane. And you can call it what you like, but I call it insanity. And those who trust that there is no God, that when they die, they will be dead, will not refrain from thinking others need to precede them there because they would be awful lonely, wouldn't they, if they were dead and they were the only ones in the darkness, you see. So they have to have a lot of people there with them and they have to stand on their heads and say, I'm the king of the underworld today. I'm the king of hell because I had more power and more sway in order to make you say, hey, you're the king today. You're the king today. So if Genghis Khan had said, well, I should just be a farmer and live in peace and harmony with my friends, you see, it would be a different history. But it's always perfect, you see, because you can hold that picture up to the light. It's like taking a slide that someone took years ago and holding it up to the light and saying, let's see what's in this slide today. We got to shine the light on it. So shine the light on his history and try to figure out how it mimics your own and how it doesn't. You are the Genghis Khan in the dark, you see. But if you look at that story and you say, well, it didn't seem to work out in the end, he just ended up in a grave situation where he had to go away, then perhaps that's not the model you want to follow. If you hold the slide of the story of Jesus up, you might say, well, I don't want to be like Jesus, God forbid, and they would crucify me, so I better bow to the king, you see. And if you hold up the slide of Buddha, maybe you would say, well, he figured it out one day. He figured it out one day. Maybe I'd like to be like him, and I'll just go sit in an ashram and pray all day, and I'll be safe from all the hordes that come rushing down on my country to destroy me because they won't look there for me. I'll be hiding, you see. And if you hold up the slide of the circle of love to the light and you say, what's going on here today? What's going on here today? You might say, well, these people don't really care about Genghis Khan or Donald Trump or anyone else because they just say they are not the way. They are not the way to play. The way to play is to split our realities. And that's what's happening. You see, the realities are splitting. The earths are splitting, you might say. And what Mr. Reimann had to say is very true that the magnetic poles are going to shift, you see, in a big way because it will be the split between the old ways and the new ways. The old ways, they pass away, and the new people will hold up the slide to the light and say, well, why did anybody ever think to play that way? That didn't get them anything, did it? Why would anybody try to play the way that they try to conquer or kill their neighbor? You see, they won't even understand it because it will be so foreign to them. And so your children and your descendants, those of you who choose to follow your own life plan that was agreed to before you were born, will say, hey, my grandchildren won't even understand that story. They won't understand why anybody would not trust on reincarnation, why anybody would not trust on love for their neighbor, why anybody would think gold was all that important, why anybody would think that they had to conquer another town or another country, why anybody would slaughter their friends just because they have a different religion, you see. We don't even know what a religion is. Is that when you get yourself in a cage and say, hey, I'll stay here if you just leave me alone and don't beat me up? Or what is it? Because your descendants will be in the world that has split off from the past, you see. Because it is my decision at this time that we have enough people who have lived enough lives to be the ones who chop down the steeple and say, that's not the way to God, you see. God's not up there. As Winnie did say, God is all around you. God is in your heart. And God is in the people that are looking at you from this windows on this screen, you see. Because it doesn't matter where it begins. It only matters where it goes, you see. Wherever you are today, you have the opportunity to just say, well, that's not the way I want to play. I want to play this way. And if you decide that you want to follow Trump because you've gotten so confused because you thought good and bad were the trust on life and death, you will say, well, this is good today. This is good today. It is good to lie and cheat. It is good to destroy the USA because you're so confused, because you don't have an internal compass that will align with me. You don't have a way to align with me and see that there never was a good and bad, honey. There never was a right and wrong. There never was original sin. There never was a sad song that did not touch my heart and cause me to say, well, we'll find a way, people. We'll find a way. There's never been a one that didn't say, why are they doing this to me today? Why are they doing this to me today? And then I didn't say, I hear you. I hear you. It's because they're so confused that they have mixed up their understanding of God with their ego, you see. They think they are God. That is the definition of ego that I give to you today. That the ego is the belief that you are the God of the universe and that you get to decide what is right, what is wrong. And as you just understood from listening, there is no right and wrong. There's only relationship, you see. You define yourself by those around you and the things around you. You define yourself as has been discussed before by how you meet your challenges in life. You define yourself by whether you understand the miracle of that blade of grass or just think it's something to throw a lot of herbicide on. So you can make a paving. You can pave, so you can what now? Make a paved lot for your cars, your gas guzzling cars, you see. And if you can't love what I gave to you, then how can you love yourself? And how can you save yourself? And so the reversal of the magnetic field has already begun, you see. It does take place periodically in the way that the human heart does play, because the human heart is the trust on the start of the next era, you see. And so there have been many different eras in human history. And many of these eras have resulted in great advancement in the way people understood how to live together. And then there have been times when so much of humanity became backwards, you see, because they created something called original sin, and they created something called religion, and they created something called heaven and hell, and they put God in a bottle and tried to sell it for some gold. that they could put in their hold, you see. And so periodically, that old dark energy that refuses to accept the light will delight. That is, do you understand delight? Will delight in quenching the light. And you will begin to see it all around you, people, because a lot of people recognize it. A lot of people in this world today understand what's at play in many different ways, in their own way, in their own field. They understand. And you will see it all around you, and it will become more evident. It will be a sight to see when my children come back to me. I love you, and I will let you contemplate these things because you've been told a lot today. And although Mr. Reimann had a lot to say about Stephanie, you need to understand that she doesn't care. She doesn't care. And this was what befuddled him in his life when he saw how smart she was and she didn't care. Why doesn't she care if others know how smart she is? Because the only ones, he said, that understood how smart she was were the ones who saw her test results. And they weren't widely published in the school. So why didn't she care? Why didn't she care? And the answer is that if you care, you wear your hair to please others. You do not please me, you see. And she pleases me because she's pleased to be able to communicate with me. And so if you know your history and you know your trajectory, just be you and say, I don't care. I don't care if I'm the one who has to lead humanity into the new reality, or if I'm the backstage worker who fixes the makeup, you see, when it gets a little smudged. I don't care because I just play my part, you see. I don't have to be center stage. I just have to be the one that is me. And if you're courageous enough to volunteer to have a life on earth, such as the one that she had, and to still come out of it and say, what a good day, what a good day, then you will be restored to the natural community of God energy, because the natural community of God energy flows through everything you see. And this is how you are to understand the Trinity. That the lover and the beloved are the two sides of reality that you understand. But the love is what binds them together, you see, and flows through both of them. And that's why you must share with each other. That's why Paige had to stand up and say what she had to say, because she understands today that she has to share her reality so others can share theirs with her. And therefore, you come together as a community of people who work together and play together in the way that the cells do in the human body. They don't all have to be a blob, you see, that rolls down the street and scares everybody. They don't have to come together like lemmings that are going to be led off the cliff or sheep that are led to the slaughter. They come together in trust that each one of them must choose for themselves to play the way the heart tells them to, or the safest way, or the most popular way, or the way that gets them the most attention, you see. You decide. You decide. And God is on your side because I will never leave you, you see. It is only you that turns away from me. Thank you. Any thoughts from anybody as we have been at this for a while to sum up or offer thoughts for those listening or yourselves or anybody in here or God or anybody in the circle?
Oh, I have a question unless someone else is going to go. No? Okay. So the magnetic pole reversal, I've been hearing about this for a long time now. Do we have an estimated time window, or is this part of all of the Earth changes that are coming?
I'll just tell you what I asked him that question. He
Okay.
said by the time it comes, people will already be kind of panicky about what's going on. But but it's important to have established a community and be self-sufficient, et cetera, before that happens in what is considered an appropriate latitude. Um, because the poles in the equator will be ravaged. But there will be lots of other effects of climate change and earth changes as well before that. So let's see if we have an answer here. Reimann is here and he says that is the question. Because although it's slated to happen, the exact date cannot be foretold because everything has to work together. And so what happens, let me explain this to you. There are patterns that occur. And these patterns are the patterns of reality. And that's what mathematics is all about. You understand that, right?
Hmm.
And so, to put it in a simple way for those who might have a little trouble understanding this, one pattern is the pattern of the human body, but you don't have any trouble telling each other apart, do you? So it's the same pattern, basically. Sometimes there's a little change in it, but mainly it is the same pattern. Two hands, two legs, two eyes, etc. And yet you can look at each other and say, well, same pattern, different result, right? But you still know you're human. So these patterns can be affected by the way you interact with them. And this is the pattern of free will. You see, it is your ability to turn back to God or turn away. And so if you trust on duality, then you trust on this and that. You trust on hot and cold, and you mix hot and cold and you get warm, right? Or cool, or various temperatures. But you have that duality of hot and cold to work with. If you trust on right and left, you can tell somebody will go right at the next corner, and they can do that because they trust on a certain orientation. You see that if they go right at the next corner, it might take them north or south or whatever, but it's a way of them moving around the earth, you might say, in a coherent way. And so these are all patterns in the way we work on earth. And all these patterns interrelate with other patterns. So as explained, the patterns that interrelate with the earth vibration include the other planets in the solar system, the moon, the sun, the other heavenly bodies in the galaxy, etc. They're all related in one way or another in their individual capacity, which you could think of as, for instance, the human body is your individual capacity, even though it's made up of many cells, electrons, photons, etc. Right? And so the effort for a long time was to find the smallest building block of all this activity, which at one time was considered the atom. This was the smallest building, or the cell at one time, perhaps. And little by little, you come to learn about infinity. But infinity is not endless, you see. It continues to be in relationship. And if it were not in relationship, then you would lose the consistency of life and it would fall apart. In other words, if God is not there to be the glue between the lover and the beloved, they would just drift apart. And that would be the end, you see, of reality and of humanity, of course. And so these patterns exist. And we call it gadabout energy when we look down at Earth and we say, hey, it's all action reaction. It's all action reaction. This person does that, that person does this person does that. And occasionally someone stops and says, why am I reacting this way? Why don't I change the way I play? This is free will. This is the ability for no reason other than that you are a free consciousness to say, I choose to play a different way. I choose to turn around, for example, and face God and not keep on trying to be a blob. So there are many ways to describe this, but what happens when someone exercises free will is that it affects the patterns. So if there is a pattern in a society, for example, to behave a certain way, and somebody says, why do we play this way? I don't want to play this way. I'm going to do it a different way. And everybody says, what a fool you are, how stupid you are, da 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 da, we might have to crucify you. They have changed the pattern of that society. They have changed the pattern of gadabout energy. It's no longer just action reaction. It can be a conscious choice as to how you will play. We've talked about the fact that when they crucified Jesus, they gave people a chance to say, hey, I agree with this guy. I'll stand up beside him. I'm a lawbreaker too. And how many did? Not even a few. And so Jesus made a choice and he changed the pattern for society. He changed the pattern. This has been said before. I know that all of you have heard this before, that Jesus changed the pattern. He did, because he used his free will to choose to play a different way. And so when you use your free will to sit down with a blade of grass, as Steph and I discussed today, and say, what a miracle you are. I love you. How beautiful you are, this single blade of grass. Think of all the people that have walked by and not stopped to say to you, how beautiful you are. So you have to go through your whole life as a blade of grass without ever being appreciated. You see? And so you change the pattern. You change the pattern by your willingness to do something that is out of context for your society, right? And as you change the pattern, it changes the pattern of the universe because it's all relational. You understand this, right? Everything changes the pattern. So that's why, although we can see the patterns, we can't see that little element of free will, which is the God factor. I call it the God factor. And that's why I had told Stephanie when she was working on the proof for the theorem of the prime numbers sequencing that the problem for humanity is they are leaving out the God factor. And so when we allowed the God factor, we got a mysterious result, didn't we, Steph? Yes, we did. It was pretty profound. And so the numbers suddenly displayed themselves in a very unusual way that was not consistent with the pattern of gadabout energy, that you had this number and that number and this and that, and you always get the same reaction, like in a mechanical universe. That mathematics is about a mechanical universe. It is not. It is the language of life. And the language of life includes the surprise, you see, because if there were not a surprise included in the design of the universe, it would be pretty boring. You see, you just plug in the numbers and know what's going to happen, right? Once you got it figured out. However, the free will that flows through consciousness is the ability to choose in a way that will defeat the mechanical universe. And often people speak of this as a miracle. And so, if you walk across those hot coals and don't burn your feet, people might say, well, that's a miracle today. Let me see that. Let me see your feet. They should be all burned up, black and blistering. And you say, well, I don't see anything there. It didn't hurt at all. They say, well, that's not the way the universe does play, so I don't believe it, even though I watched it with my own eyes. You must have put something special on your feet or something, because they live in a mechanical universe. They have written the God factor out. They have written out the ability of every one of you to exercise free will and to make a choice and not just to be a reactor. Got enough nuclear reactors in the world. We don't need to depend on them to give us power, you see, because the power in your little finger, as they say, is greater than all the forces that oppose you. And so the question of when this will occur is subject to alterations in the pattern through the exercise of free will. And when some of you say, well, I'm going to exercise my free will to play in a different way, then you are changing the patterns not only of your society, but of the earth energy. Do you understand this? It is very important to understand this. The power inside you is the power to affect the universe. Because although it might not happen in a moment from where you're looking, from God's perspective, the whole pattern has changed the moment you cease to be just a reactor and exercise free choice and say, well, I choose to do this today. I don't have to explain it to you. I don't have to justify it to you. I don't have to get you to follow me. I don't have to do anything except choose today to play this way. And so the pattern for humanity changed with Jesus, but he was not the only. The pattern for humanity changed with a lot of people who said, hey, I'm going to play a different way. This is the way I'm going to play, and I'll tell you how I'm going to play. And if you don't like it, I guess you'll have to do what you do. But that's okay, because I am eternal, you see. I am not going to die. I'm not like Genghis Khan. I'm not going to have to pile up all the bodies because I don't know what else to do. I just don't know what else to do other than stand on the heads of those I decapitated in a desire to climb out of this dark hole I'm in. Does this make sense to you?
It makes sense to me.
All right. Any other thoughts or questions before we close down today?
I just wanted to thank Reimann for his message. It was very timely and made me feel better about the decisions I'm making.
Good. All right. Well,
I'll be
thank you
happy to.
all, and thank you for tuned in to listen. And you can subscribe if you'd like to continue to be noticed when we have new videos that come out. Or you can contact me on Facebook, or if you're interested in contacting other people, just put it in a comment and they'll find a way to, and what your Facebook is, and they'll find a way to connect with you. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.